Good evening. Before you close your eyes tonight, let's wander into a quiet moment from long ago, a time when every secret was whispered under the gentle glow of a single flame. This is a story about candlelight and what it revealed after midnight. So settle in, let the sound of the crackling fire wrap around you, and let your thoughts drift softly into stillness. As the night deepens, take a slow breath and feel your body unwind. The calm rhythm of this voice, the warmth of the fire, and the slow dance of history are here to help you relax, to help you drift into that peaceful space between waking and sleep. If your eyes grow heavy, that's perfectly fine. This is your moment to rest. I wonder, from which country are you listening tonight? And what time is it where you are? Wherever you may be, I'm glad you're here, sharing this quiet story together. Before we move further, if you enjoy calm history stories like this one, you're welcome to tap the like or subscribe button. Not now, only if you're still awake at the end. For now, just breathe and listen. The candle burns low in a silent room. The world outside has long fallen asleep. No footsteps, no chatter, just the faint hum of night. Inside, one small flame paints golden ripples on the walls, swaying gently in the air like it knows a secret it will never tell. Long ago, before electricity, this was how people experienced the night. The soft glow of a single candle could change how a person felt, how they spoke, and how they thought. Light was precious, not just for seeing, but for feeling safe. It was a quiet guardian against the deep unknown of darkness. Every flicker of that flame was alive with motion, warm, slow, unpredictable. It was not perfect or steady, yet that's what made it beautiful. People said the candle revealed what daylight hid: the thoughts, the emotions, and the quiet truths that only came out when the world was finally still. If you've ever sat beside a candle at night, you know that feeling. The shadows stretch and curl across the table. Time seems to move differently. Even your own heartbeat feels slower, calmer, more thoughtful. It's as though the flame reminds you that silence can also speak. And so, in homes centuries ago, when the wind brushed softly against wooden shutters, and the room smelled faintly of wax and smoke, someone might sit awake just thinking, not worrying, not rushing, just being. The candle was enough. When people wrote letters in those hours, their ink caught the light in slow glimmers. Each word looked alive for a moment before fading into paper. Some wrote to remember, others simply to understand what they felt. The candle, in its quiet way, became a listener. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders drop. You're safe here. The stories we tell tonight are soft ones, about ordinary people, quiet rooms, and the timeless comfort of a warm flame. If you find your thoughts drifting, let them. The story will be here, waiting, when you return. Even now, across centuries, the image of candlelight connects us. It is fragile, but steady. Just like rest, it asks for nothing, only that we slow down long enough to notice. And as we do, we might begin to see what our ancestors once saw, how much light a small flame can hold. Let your breathing follow the rhythm of this story, in and out, slow and calm. Every word is meant to help you drift, like a feather settling onto quiet water. In the next few moments, we'll step deeper into that world, into the late hours when the candle still burned, and the night began to reveal its quiet secrets. But for now, stay warm, stay still, and let the calm of history surround you. The night often had its own rhythm. Outside, the wind hummed against stone walls and wooden beams. Inside, the candle moved with the quiet pulse of the air, its flame leaning and recovering like a slow breath. Every moment felt stretched, softer, as if time itself had decided to rest. The candle's light didn't just brighten the room, it shaped it. Corners disappeared into shadows, and familiar things took on gentler forms. A cup on the table, a folded cloth, a window frame, each seemed wrapped in stillness. Nothing rushed to be seen. Everything waited quietly under the flame's patient gaze. In those hours, thoughts flowed differently. People spoke in low voices, or not at all. A conversation might pause for several minutes, not because words were forgotten, but because silence felt enough. The candle filled the space where noise usually lived, reminding everyone that peace could also be an answer. For travelers who carried candles on long roads, the light was more than a tool. It was a companion, small but loyal, fragile but dependable. When night stretched across unknown paths, that single flame meant safety. Its warmth reminded them that even in loneliness, light could still find a way forward. Wax melted in slow trails, creating patterns that looked like tiny rivers of gold. Each drop marked the passing of another quiet minute. Some found comfort in watching it fall, knowing that the night would not last forever. Like the candle, every worry eventually melted into calm. As the hours deepened, the flame grew lower, whispering against the wick. Its glow turned softer, more golden, as if preparing for rest. The air carried a gentle scent of smoke and melted wax, not unpleasant, but familiar, like a blanket pulled over tired shoulders. People often said that the mind became clearest after midnight, not because of any mystery, but because the world stopped asking for attention. In that rare silence, one could hear their own thoughts clearly, thoughts about love, work, memories, and simple gratitude for the quiet night. Occasionally, the flame would flicker wildly, startled by a draft sneaking through the cracks. Shadows danced along the walls for a moment, then settled again. Even this, people found beautiful. They saw it as a reminder that peace was not the absence of movement, but the ability to stay calm when the world shifts. When the wick finally bent and the light began to fade, the room sank into gentle darkness. No one feared it. It was the signal that the day had truly ended and that sleep was near. The candle had done its work, a quiet guide through the longest hours of the night. And so, as the last trace of light dissolved into the air, stillness returned completely. Somewhere, far off, a rooster would soon stir, and morning would come again. But for now, in this moment between night and dawn, there was only calm, warmth, and rest. The flame had told its story, and the world finally could sleep. Before the hum of modern lights and the steady glow of screens, nights once belonged to shadows. When the sun slipped beneath the horizon, the world changed its rhythm entirely. Villages dimmed, conversations quieted, and life gathered close around the fragile glow of flame. A single candle could mean comfort, safety, or even survival. Without it, the night stretched endlessly, filled with sounds that the eye could not explain. The soft circle of light became a small island against a sea of darkness, not to fight it, but to exist peacefully within it. Homes of wood and stone, once lively during the day, transformed after dusk. The faint light softened every surface, turning sharp corners into gentle shapes. Walls seemed closer, the air heavier, and each creak of the floor sounded like the house itself was breathing in sleep. People often ended their work as soon as daylight faded. The effort of keeping candles or oil lamps burning through long hours was expensive and difficult. So families gathered together in one room, close to the fire, speaking softly or mending clothes by the wavering light. It was not a time for haste. The night invited stillness. Children learned to fall asleep to the flicker of that glow. They watched how shadows moved on the ceiling, how the light swayed like a slow heartbeat. There were no clocks to chase, no machines to hum, only the steady rhythm of night and the whisper of the wind outside. For travelers, the darkness could feel endless. On roads where no lanterns marked the way, people often carried torches or small lamps protected by glass. The light barely reached beyond an arm's length, but it was enough to see the next few steps and to trust that the path would continue. Inside quiet villages, the night sky looked heavier, clearer. Without streetlights, stars appeared like rivers above the rooftops. The moon, when full, offered a silver glow that guided farmers home or lit the edges of sleeping fields. Light, in that world, was both fragile and precious, a gift to be guarded carefully. The sound of night was different too. Without constant machines, even small noises felt large. The cry of an owl, the creak of wood, the whisper of the breeze through leaves. Yet, instead of fear, many felt comfort. These sounds reminded them that the world was alive, resting but never gone. As candles burned low, people's thoughts slowed with them. Words grew fewer. The glow touched their faces with a quiet gentleness, and conversations drifted naturally into silence. The night became a companion, not an emptiness. It carried time forward at its own slow pace, teaching patience without ever speaking. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost feel that world, the warmth of wax and smoke, the calm of dim rooms, and the soft patience of a life guided by the rise and fall of natural light. It was a world that asked for less, but gave something more lasting in return, peace in the rhythm of darkness and light. When we think of the past, it's easy to imagine constant darkness after sunset. But in truth, people adapted. Their eyes grew used to dim light, and their senses sharpened. They could navigate their homes by memory, feeling the texture of walls and listening to the smallest sounds. Night didn't feel empty, it felt alive in its own quiet way. Evening was the time for reflection. Without distractions or noise, people often spoke more meaningfully. A simple story told by a parent, a whispered plan for tomorrow's work, or a shared silence near the hearth. These moments built bonds stronger than light itself. Candles were not just a source of brightness, but a reason to gather. The smell of tallow or beeswax often filled the air. It was earthy and faintly sweet, mixing with smoke and the scent of cooked grain. That fragrance became the signature of nighttime, a reminder that the day was over and that rest was near. Every home carried it differently, yet it was familiar to all. We sometimes forget how precious flame was in those days. It needed care. A small breeze could end it. A candle left unattended could burn more than wax. So people learned to respect light, to protect it, nurture it, and understand its fragile beauty. It was a daily lesson in patience and gratitude. For many, the night was also a time of quiet creation. Weavers, carvers, and thinkers found peace in the slower rhythm of darkness. With the flame as their only witness, they worked carefully, not to chase perfection but to find calm in the doing. The world outside might sleep, but their hands continued the soft hum of purpose. There was something deeply human in how people shaped their nights. Instead of fighting darkness, they accepted it as a part of life's design. The day was for movement, the night for stillness. Both were needed, and both held their own kind of wisdom. Sometimes, travelers passing through villages would see windows glowing faintly in the distance, small golden dots scattered across the hills. It was comforting, knowing others were awake too. Each flame marked a home, a story, a heartbeat against the vast, dark sky. The first sign of dawn always came quietly. Candles burned shorter, and their light looked pale compared to the faint blue rising outside. People often watched as night surrendered to morning, not with regret, but with calm acceptance. The rhythm continued, light returned, and life began again. Even centuries later, when electricity transformed the world, something was lost. The glow became constant, unblinking, too easy to take for granted. The fragile pause that once filled the night faded away. Yet within the memory of candlelight lies a gentle reminder of how stillness once shaped our minds. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine that simple world again, the air faint with the scent of wax, the quiet hum of the night, and the calm certainty that light, however small, was enough. It was a world slower than ours, but perhaps, in its quiet rhythm, it understood rest far better than we do. There's something about candlelight that speaks directly to the human mind. The way it moves, never still, yet never rushing, draws our thoughts into its rhythm. For centuries, people found themselves staring into its soft glow, not to look for answers, but to let their minds rest from the noise of the day. The flame seemed alive, but gentle. It flickered and swayed, creating a dance that was neither random nor planned. Watching it could quiet a restless heart, as if every movement whispered, "Slow down." The mind followed, untangling its thoughts the way smoke curls and disappears into the dark. In that fragile light, the human imagination began to wander. The mind softened, seeing beauty where daylight had only shown details. A simple cup, a folded letter, a worn table under candlelight, they felt different, less ordinary, more alive with meaning. Light changed how people saw, but also how they felt. Writers and thinkers often worked late beside a candle. The uneven light made them pause often, forcing reflection between every few lines. Many believed this rhythm, light, shadow, pause, helped thoughts flow more naturally. It was as if the mind spoke more clearly when it was half in darkness. Some people found comfort in silence during these hours. The candle's soft crackle became enough sound to fill the space. Others used this quiet time to look inward, not in grand ways, but simply to understand their own hearts. In those moments, the smallest thoughts felt meaningful, as if the flame could hear them too. Long before psychology existed, people understood something simple about the mind, that calm comes when focus is gentle. A candle helped create that focus. Not demanding, not distracting, just softly present. The mind could rest in its presence without fear of interruption. Children sometimes watched the flame before sleep, their eyes growing heavy as it blurred into gold. Parents noticed how quickly calm followed, not from the light itself, but from the peace it created. The candle taught stillness in a way no words could. Even today, the memory of that light remains comforting. In a world of constant brightness, it reminds us of slower hours when thought and rest shared the same space. The candle's warmth carried something human, not just heat, but attention. It made people notice the world again, one quiet moment at a time. For centuries, this small flame became a companion in solitude. Travelers wrote about its company, scholars about its inspiration, and families about its quiet reassurance. The candle was never grand, yet it filled the night with meaning. It connected thought, emotion, and rest into one soft thread of light. Take a slow breath and picture that scene. the still room, the soft flicker, the patient silence of the hour. In such a space, the mind didn't need to chase anything. It simply existed, as calm and steady as the flame before it. The longer one watched the flame, the more it seemed to shape thought itself. Each flicker invited another idea, another memory, another quiet reflection. The candle did not rush anyone. It allowed the mind to wander safely, the way a calm sea lets a small boat drift without fear. Many artists and writers described this strange state of half-thought and half-dream. In the dim light, imagination softened. It became easier to remember distant moments, or to imagine worlds that never were. The shadows helped too. They created mystery without fear, inviting wonder in place of worry. People often said that candlelight showed not what was real, but what was possible. Under its glow, even the simplest things felt layered with meaning. A ring on a table could recall a promise. A folded cloth could suggest care. The flame made everyday life feel closer to the heart. When storms passed outside, the candle became a symbol of endurance. Its light wavered, but did not disappear. Watching it stand against the wind reminded people that calm was not about stillness, but about continuing gently, even when the world shook around you. There was also a rhythm between mind and flame, an unspoken dialogue. When one leaned close, the candle responded with a dance. When one looked away, it steadied itself again. It was not alive, yet it seemed to understand presence, reminding the watcher to simply be here, in this moment. In letters and diaries from centuries past, people often wrote of how the night changed their thoughts. Ideas that felt heavy in daylight seemed lighter in candlelight. Worries softened. Pride disappeared. The quiet light made room for honesty, both comforting and humbling at once. The warmth of the candle was never overwhelming. It offered just enough heat to soften the air, to make the room feel human. That small warmth connected the body and mind. The skin felt comfort, the mind found peace. It was a kind of balance between the visible and the invisible. Even when the candle burned low, its shrinking flame had a lesson of its own. As it dimmed, people often felt their thoughts slow too, ready for rest. The mind followed the light naturally, accepting its end as part of the night's rhythm. The glow didn't vanish suddenly. It faded kindly. There is something timeless in that image. A quiet room, a single flame, and a peaceful mind. Though the centuries have changed our world, the need for calm has not. Candlelight remains a soft reminder that tranquility begins not with silence, but with gentle attention. And so, when the last trace of light trembled and dissolved into smoke, the mind felt complete, not because it had solved anything, but because it had finally stopped searching. In the brief darkness that followed, peace arrived quietly, the kind that doesn't ask to be noticed, only felt. While most of the world slept, a few remained awake beneath the soft glow of a candle. These were the watchers, the workers, and the thinkers of the night people, whose hands or minds could not rest when darkness came. The stillness around them was not loneliness, it was space. Space to think, to build, and to listen. In quiet workshops, the hum of daylight was replaced by the scratch of tools and the steady rhythm of work. A potter might shape clay under the trembling light, seeing its surface gleam like soft gold. A scribe might bend over parchment, tracing careful letters that gleamed for a second before the shadows swallowed them again. Candlelight made every task slower, but that slowness had meaning. Each movement had to be deliberate, each decision calm. Mistakes came easily when the light wavered, so patience became as important as skill. In this way, The night shaped not only what people made, but how they made it. Guards and travelers, too, lived by the candle's gentle rule. Their eyes grew used to the uneven light, their ears tuned to the slightest sound. The world was smaller at night. The edge of vision ended where the glow stopped, but somehow that made every small thing feel more significant. For healers working through long nights, the candle became a companion. It stood beside them as they mixed herbs, wrote notes, or checked on a sleeping patient. The flame offered a reminder that even in uncertainty, a little light was enough to continue. It was not grand, but it was steady, and sometimes that was all one needed. Writers who stayed awake spoke of how the quiet hours carried a different kind of inspiration. Thoughts arrived slower but clearer. Words took their time, and silence filled the spaces between them like deep breaths. It wasn't about productivity. It was about presence. The act of giving full attention to a moment that would soon pass. In small homes, artisans mended clothes or tools before dawn. The candlelight revealed the careful movements of their fingers, stitching, polishing, repairing. These quiet labors often went unnoticed by others, yet they kept families warm, safe, and ready for the day to come. Outside, the world held its breath. Streets lay empty, rivers whispered, and even the air seemed to move more gently. In that calm, night work felt sacred, not because of any ritual, but because of the stillness it required. Every sound, every breath, seemed part of the same fragile balance. The people who worked through these hours often spoke of a strange peace that arrived only after midnight. It was not joy or sadness, just calm. The kind that comes when all distractions have faded, and only the steady flame remains to keep company with thought. Take a moment to imagine that room, a single worker, their tools resting near the glow, their mind focused yet relaxed. Outside, the wind drifts past, unnoticed. Inside, time stretches softly, held together by patience, purpose, and the quiet rhythm of work in the dark. As the night deepened, time seemed to stretch and fold. Minutes passed like drifting clouds, unhurried and without weight. Those who worked beneath candlelight often lost track of hours entirely. Their focus narrowed to the quiet world before them, the circle of light, the soft hiss of wax, and the rhythm of their hands. In the silence, even small actions carried meaning. A writer setting down a quill, a carpenter smoothing the edge of wood, a weaver tightening the last thread. Each movement became part of a ritual of care, not for show, but for peace. The candle made every gesture visible, reminding its watcher that attention itself was a kind of art. Sometimes, the work stopped for a moment. A pause to rest the eyes, to stretch the fingers, or simply to watch the flame breathe. That pause was not wasted. It allowed the mind to settle again, to remember why the task mattered. In a world lit by fire, rest and work shared the same quiet rhythm. The candle's light was often uneven, falling stronger on one side, softer on another. This created shadows that moved like living companions. People learned to see through them, not against them. The darkness was not an enemy. It was part of the balance, giving shape to what the light revealed. In some workshops, 2 or 3 candles burned together, their flames merging like slow rivers of gold. The warmth they offered was faint, but enough. Those who stayed awake through the night found comfort in that small abundance, a glow large enough to hold their focus, but never so bright that it chased the mystery away. Letters written at these hours often carried a special tone. Their words were softer, more thoughtful, as if written with the patience of the flame itself. Many historians notice that these late writings speak less of the outside world and more of what lives quietly inside the heart. The night was never silent in full. A mouse might rustle in the straw, a log might shift in the hearth, the wind might murmur against old walls, but these sounds did not disturb. They joined the music of stillness. Each sound reminded the worker that life continued even when unseen. As dawn approached, the candle's glow began to fade against the growing blue of morning. Yet no one hurried. The last few moments of light were precious time to finish a final line, to close a tool, to exhale before sleep or sunrise. The end of night work was not abrupt. It was graceful, like a curtain drawn slowly over the scene. When the flame finally dimmed, the worker often felt both tired and peaceful. The task was done, or nearly done, and the quiet labor had left a sense of calm behind. There was satisfaction not in speed or perfection, but in having given care to something with steady hands and a steady mind. And so, the candle's purpose ended as softly as it began. The smoke curled upward, thin and fleeting, leaving behind only the faint scent of wax and warmth. The tools cooled, the paper dried, and the world began to wake. The night's silent craft had served its purpose, not to chase the dark away, but to make peace within it. Shadows were the silent companions of candlelight. Wherever the flame lived, they followed, bending, stretching, and fading with every breath of air. In the quiet of night, when the world slowed down enough to notice, those shifting shapes seemed almost alive. They told stories of stillness and movement, of presence and change. When people long ago watched the walls around them, they often saw shapes that weren't really there, a flicker that looked like a person passing, or a curve that resembled a face. These illusions were not frightening to everyone. To many, they were simply part of the night's imagination, reflections of thought made visible in wavering light. Candlelight revealed what sunlight could not. It softened the edges of things and made the ordinary seem mysterious. A chair became a tower, a curtain, a figure, a book, a landscape of peaks and valleys. The mind, half dreaming, filled in what the eyes could not see. It was not deception, it was quiet creativity born from the dark. People learned to understand that shadows were not enemies of light, but its partners. One could not exist without the other. The dance between them brought life to motionless rooms. Each flicker of the flame redrew the world, reminding those who watched that everything was always changing, even in silence. Children often played with their shadows before bed, tracing shapes with their hands or pretending to make small animals on the walls. The candle became a storyteller, and the wall its stage. Laughter would fade into yawns, and soon sleep would follow, leaving the flame to whisper to the shadows alone. For adults, shadows sometimes carried meaning, not as omens or mysteries, but as quiet metaphors for thought. The way light revealed and hid in the same moment mirrored the way the human heart held both calm and confusion. Watching the candle flicker was like watching one's own emotions find balance between clarity and doubt. The human mind has always found patterns in movement. Even the smallest shift of shadow could suggest a story. At night, when the world was still, imagination took over. Faces appeared on walls, scenes formed from the folds of cloth, and what began as trick of light became small moments of wonder before sleep. Artists and writers often drew inspiration from these shapes. The dance of shadow and flame gave texture to their ideas, a reminder that beauty didn't need to be clear or bright. It could hide in softness, in suggestion, in the in-between. Candlelight became not just illumination, but emotion itself, the light of thought, the shadow of reflection. In rooms lit only by flame, the walls seemed to breathe. The shadows moved like waves, drifting across furniture and faces. People sitting quietly would sometimes feel a strange peace watching it happen, as though the room itself was alive in its own slow rhythm, sharing its silence with them. And so, in those centuries before electricity, every night carried a small performance. The candle played its role, the shadows followed, and the watchers found calm in simply observing. The stage was simple, just a room and a wall, yet the story it told was endless. Written in light, erased in darkness, and remembered in dreams. Sometimes, the shadows told more about a person than the light ever could. In the quiet hours, when only a single candle burned, a face might appear thoughtful, distant, or calm, not because of expression, but because of how the light touched it. People saw themselves differently then, softer and quieter, shaped by the tender honesty of the flame. In old journals, there are moments described in delicate detail, the way a shadow moved across a page, or how a wall seemed to flicker with unseen patterns. For the people who lived in those candlelit nights, this was a kind of meditation. They weren't looking for meaning. They were simply noticing the world as it gently shifted around them. Shadows became a way to measure time. When the candle burned lower, the shapes grew longer and thinner, sliding upward until they disappeared. The walls changed color with each passing hour, gold, amber, then gray. It was a soft reminder that the night, like the flame, was never still. In larger halls or quiet workshops, many worked by the rhythm of those shadows. The craftsman could tell how late it was by the angle of darkness across his table. The scribe could sense the hour by the softness of the ink under dim light. Without clocks, shadow and instinct worked together, a partnership of patience and attention. For some, the night carried a kind of intimacy that daylight could not offer. The limited vision brought people closer. Words spoken beside a candle felt more personal, more deliberate. In the half-dark, one's voice became part of the light, quiet, warm, and fleeting. Conversations glowed like the flame itself, gentle and temporary. Travelers who stopped at inns described the comfort of such rooms. The shadows moved over wooden beams, over cups, over weary hands. The light gave no sharp edges. It hid flaws, soothed faces, and made strangers look familiar. Candlelight softened everything it touched, teaching that even imperfection could be beautiful in the right glow. For those who prayed or reflected in solitude, the shadows became reminders of humility. They were not signs of fear, but of awareness, the knowledge that everything visible also fades. Just as the flame rose and fell, so did the shapes around it. The night became a quiet lesson in acceptance, not mystery. At times, a sudden draft would send the flame dancing, and the room came alive again. Walls breathing, objects moving, light running wild for a heartbeat. Then, just as quickly, stillness returned. That brief moment of motion often lingered in memory, like a dream half remembered the next morning. The candle and its shadows were never the same twice. Every evening brought new patterns, new soft illusions that belonged only to that night. When people finally lay down to rest, those images drifted with them, gold and grey shapes floating behind their closed eyes, leading them gently toward sleep. And so, the secret of the shadows was not about fear or superstition. It was about observation, the art of seeing beauty in things that move quietly and change without warning. The candle taught this truth each night, that what flickers may vanish, but while it lasts, it fills the world with quiet wonder. After midnight, the world grew lighter in sound and heavier in silence. There was a stillness that few ever heard, a calm so deep that even the smallest sound felt alive. In those hours, when most slept and only the candle remained, the night belonged to the listeners. The midnight listeners were not a single kind of person. They could be scholars, guards, travelers, or simply those who couldn't find rest. What united them was quiet awareness, the ability to hear the world when it stopped speaking loudly. The tick of cooling wood, the whisper of a draft, even one's own breathing became part of the symphony of night. People said that ideas came differently after midnight. Thoughts were softer, yet clearer, as if the world finally gave permission to think slowly. There was no rush, no noise to interrupt, only the small sounds of existence, the flick of a flame, the turning of a page, the distant cry of an animal somewhere far beyond the dark. For the listener, these sounds were not distractions but companions. They filled the silence with texture, proof that life continued even in the quietest moments. The night had a pulse, slow but steady, and the candle's faint crackle seemed to keep time with it. Writers often spoke about how words flowed differently in these hours. Their ink dried slower, their thoughts wandered longer. The rhythm of creation matched the rhythm of the night, deliberate, reflective, almost meditative. The candle did not rush them. It encouraged thought to unfold naturally, one breath at a time. Guards, standing their lonely watch, found the same peace. Though their duty was vigilance, they too became listeners. The echo of boots on stone, the sigh of the wind across rooftops, these were not just noises, but signs that the world was still breathing. Even duty found calm in that shared quiet. For some, the stillness carried memory. The absence of noise brought the past closer, like an echo returning from far away. People would remember voices, faces, or moments they had forgotten in the day's chaos. The mind, no longer distracted, gently replayed what it wanted to understand again. Musicians of the past sometimes practiced in the late hours when the air itself felt more sensitive. A single note could fill a whole house, hanging softly in the air. The candlelight shimmered on instruments, and shadows moved in time with the melody. The music did not need to be loud, it simply needed to be heard by the night. Even nature seemed to listen then. Trees rustled softly, as though whispering to one another. Streams slowed, birds slept, and animals paused in their movement. Everything appeared to respect the quiet. The listeners of midnight were not apart from this world. They were part of it, sharing its unspoken language of calm. To sit awake at that hour was not always easy, but it had a kind of beauty. The darkness became less of an absence and more of a presence, a soft space that held you gently, asking for nothing in return. It was the world's reminder that silence, too, could be full. Those who stayed awake after midnight often spoke of a strange kind of connection, not with people, but with the world itself. When noise disappeared, every small detail became clear. The creak of a chair, the flutter of a moth near the candle, the soft shift of air through an open window. Each sound felt like part of a gentle conversation that required no words. The human heart, too, seemed too slow to match that rhythm. Its beats, softened, steady, calm. In that space between wakefulness and sleep, a quiet awareness took hold, not alertness, but acceptance. It was the kind of calm that doesn't need to be earned, only noticed. Philosophers once wrote that the deepest thinking happened at night, not because of the darkness, but because of the silence it carried. Thought expanded when the world stopped demanding attention. In the still hours, ideas grew like seeds in fertile soil, unseen, but alive, waiting for morning to bring them forward. For travelers, the late hours were both comforting and lonely. On long journeys, They would rest beside dim lamps, their minds drifting as they listened to the faint sounds of night animals or the wind against their tents. Many said that these were the moments they understood peace, not the absence of movement, but the feeling of belonging wherever they paused. Writers sometimes described the sound of the quill scratching against paper as a kind of heartbeat. In that small noise lived the proof of being awake while the rest of the world slept. The candle leaned close, its flame trembling, and the ink caught the light like tiny sparks of thought. Even those who did not work or write found meaning in wakefulness. They simply listened to rain, to distant bells, to their own breath. Some found that this quiet attention turned into gratitude. For the roof above them, for the warmth of light, for the steady rhythm of another night passing safely. The midnight listeners rarely spoke about what they felt, but many kept the habit throughout their lives. They learned that there was a certain wisdom in stillness, a kind that didn't come from reading or speaking, but from allowing the mind to rest long enough to hear the world again. Every few hours, the candle would burn lower, the shadows growing taller along the walls. The listener would notice this, not with sadness, but with calm acceptance. The fading light was not an ending, only a sign that night was completing its quiet journey. The world moved gently toward morning. When dawn began to soften the sky, the sounds of life slowly returned, the distant call of a bird, the first footstep in the street, the faint stirring of the wind. For the listener, this was not a disruption, but a reminder. The silence had done its work, and now the day could begin again. And so, the midnight listeners closed their eyes at last. They had heard what most people never noticed, the small, delicate voice of the night itself. The world had spoken softly, and they had listened. Now, with calm in their chest and warmth on their skin, they finally drifted into sleep, carried by the same peace that once filled the candle's light. Every candle told a story, not only in its light, but in the way it melted. The slow descent of wax, the faint hiss as it met cooler air, these small signs carried quiet meaning to those who knew how to see them. In a world without ticking clocks, the candle became its own language, speaking in drops, shapes, and trails of time. People long ago learned to read this gentle language. They noticed how wax moved when the air was still, or how the flame leaned when the room grew restless. It wasn't superstition, it was awareness, a habit of observation born from living close to silence. The candle didn't tell the future, but it revealed the present in delicate, shimmering detail. When a candle burned smoothly, its surface calm and steady, people often said it reflected a peaceful night. But when it sputtered or sent wax tumbling down its sides, they took it as a whisper of wind, a shift in mood, or a change in the air. The language was poetic, not literal, a way of paying attention to the smallest signs of life around them. Each drop of wax left behind a record of time past. Some dripped in even lines, others froze mid-fall, suspended like small rivers turned to stone. These shapes caught the imagination. A candle that burned through a long night of work or thought left behind a sculpture of the hours, a map of patience, persistence, and quiet endurance. Children sometimes traced these patterns with their fingers after the flame had gone. They felt the smoothness, the coolness, the strange softness of what had once been warm. To them, the candle's remains were like fossils of light, proof that warmth and brightness had existed here, if only for a little while. In many homes, people kept candles that had burned during special nights, not for luck, but as keepsakes, reminders of a long conversation, a birth, a wedding, or a simple evening that had felt calm and complete. Each hardened stream of wax became part of memory, a small monument to passing moments. Artisans who worked with candles understood their moods well. They knew how different waxes behaved, how wicks bent, and how air moved in a room. Their craft was quiet, careful, and full of patience. A candle that burned evenly was a sign of balance between heat and air, effort and rest. In some old workshops, people measured time through candles. Small nails were pressed into the wax at intervals. When the flame reached one, the metal fell with a faint sound, a gentle reminder that another hour had passed. It was a soft way to count time, guided not by precision, but by rhythm. Travelers, too, sometimes marked their journeys with candles. In inns or small cabins, they would light one upon arrival, letting it burn as they wrote or rested. When it melted halfway, they knew the night was nearly over. The candle became both companion and clock patient, quiet, endlessly humble, and always, when morning came, the melted wax spoke for the hours that had gone before. The trails and folds told no grand story, only one of endurance. The candle had lived, given, and faded, leaving behind a soft landscape of stillness, a physical echo of time well spent beneath its light. When the candle burned lower, its voice changed. The flame crackled faintly, the wax deepened in color, and the scent grew sweeter, heavier. The room felt smaller, as if the light pulled everything closer to itself. People often paused at this moment, aware that the night was reaching its quiet conclusion. Some found peace in simply watching the wax move. It flowed and stilled in turns, like thought itself melting, shifting, then resting again. In the softness of its motion, there was something deeply human, the reminder that even things which fade can do so beautifully. Not every candle burned the same. Some bent at strange angles, their wicks leaning until they touched the edge. Others split into small twin flames, dancing together until one went out. To those who stayed awake, these differences became familiar, tiny personalities of light. Each with its own rhythm and temperament, people began to associate emotions with the way their candles burned. A calm, steady flame might bring comfort during reflection, while a restless one could mirror unease. It wasn't belief in luck, it was empathy for the flame. Seeing in it the same fragility and persistence found in the human heart. In letters written centuries ago, people described how a single candle could seem alive. Its movements felt expressive, hopeful, sorrowful, or calm, though everyone knew it was only the play of air and heat. Still, they watched as though the flame shared their silence, their waiting, their long nights of thought. As wax collected around the base, its shape revealed the story of the hours past. Wide pools marked long conversations. Tall ridges meant steady focus. Every candle left behind a trace of its purpose, whether to guide, to comfort, or simply to exist until sleep arrived. In large households, servants gathered the leftover wax each morning to be melted again. From the remnants of many nights, new candles were born. There was quiet symbolism in that act, the idea that even what had finished its task could still give light again, renewed by careful hands and patience. Some thinkers saw this as a reflection of time itself. Days melted into nights, nights into mornings, each one leaving behind the shape of what had happened. Nothing lasted forever, yet everything left a mark, even if only as faint as the ridges on cooled wax. Before sleep, people often looked at the candle one last time, the way it leaned, the way the light trembled before it dimmed. There was tenderness in that gaze, a small farewell to something that had kept them company through thought and quiet. The moment the flame sighed into smoke was always gentle, almost merciful, and when darkness finally settled, the scent of melted wax lingered, faint but familiar, like a memory that doesn't fade completely. It spoke of warmth, of patience, and of the simple beauty of endings. The candle's language had no words, yet every listener understood. Peace is found not only in light, but in the soft fading of it. Long before the modern world shaped its rigid schedules, the night once held two distinct dreams. People did not sleep in a single stretch as we do now. Instead, they drifted into what was called the first sleep, a deep slumber that carried them through the early hours of darkness, and then woke again for a quiet pause before the second sleep began. This rhythm of rest was natural, not forced. The human body followed the patterns of darkness and silence, guided by the faint glow of candlelight or the fading fire. When the first sleep ended, many would stir gently, not fully awake, but aware enough to sit, to think, or to whisper a few soft words into the still air. The hours between those two sleeps were calm and private. Historians now call them the watch, a time when the world stood perfectly still. There were no demands, no noise, no work that could not wait. Some used this hour to pray, others to write, or simply to sit near the hearth, feeling the warmth of its last embers. The candle often burned during this middle hour. Its low flame flickered softly, casting wide, slow shadows that filled the room with peace. It wasn't bright enough to fully wake the mind, but just enough to keep the darkness kind. The world felt smaller, safer, as if night itself had drawn closer in comfort. Families who shared the same room often whispered quietly during these hours. A few exchanged stories or dreams from the first sleep. Some sat in silence, listening to the wind outside, the soft creak of the house, or the rhythm of their own breathing. These were moments of connection that daylight rarely allowed. For those who worked with their hands, this interval between sleeps was useful. Bakers rose to prepare dough, farmers checked their tools, and mothers sometimes nursed their children under the soft glow of the fire. Yet even in work, the atmosphere remained calm. No urgency, only rhythm. The world moved slowly, with purpose and patience. In towns and villages, one might see a faint candle through a window at this hour, or hear a soft sound of stirring behind closed doors. It was not strange to be awake. The whole community shared this quiet pattern of life, half dreaming, half waking, connected by the same pause before dawn. Doctors and philosophers of the past noticed this habit and even encouraged it. They believed it helped the mind rest twice, once through deep sleep, and again through gentle reflection. They wrote that the body recovered better this way, allowing space for both renewal and thought. The night, they said, was meant to be lived in two parts. The return to second sleep came naturally after a time of soft reflection. People simply lay down again, wrapping themselves in blankets, letting the last light fade. The transition required no effort. The body understood when to drift once more into dreams. In those moments, when the candle's glow finally dimmed and the fire sank low, the night reached its calmest point. Between sleep and wakefulness, thought and dream, there existed a stillness so deep it almost hummed. It was the world breathing in before dawn, the quiet secret of the second sleep. When people awoke during that gentle pause, their minds often wandered to thoughts left unfinished from the day before. Freed from the rush of daylight, ideas seemed to come with greater clarity. In those quiet hours, some planned their work, others pondered small worries, and many simply watched the fire's last light fade to embers. Letters from centuries ago described this time as peaceful, even sacred in its stillness. There was no sense of disruption in waking, only an awareness that the night still belonged to them. The space between sleeps was not empty, it was filled with quiet presence, a moment of life lived slowly and without demand. Scholars used those hours to read or write, finding that their minds were clearest when the world was half asleep. The stillness gave thoughts room to unfold naturally, without the pressure of the coming day. The only sounds were the scratching of a quill, the faint sigh of wind, and the slow breathing of those still dreaming nearby. For couples or families, it was a time of soft conversation. Words spoken between first and second sleep carried a special kind of intimacy, unhurried, unguarded, often forgotten by morning but deeply felt in the moment. It was as if the night, in its kindness, gave people permission to speak from the quietest part of themselves. In rural homes, some stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool air touch their skin. The stars stretched brighter then, untouched by the noise of the waking world. The earth felt vast but gentle, and the night sky seemed close enough to reach. The silence of those early hours was deep enough to calm any restless mind. Children, half awake, often mumbled fragments of dreams before sinking back into second sleep. Their parents would listen softly, smiling in the half-dark, watching the slow rise and fall of their breathing. These simple, quiet scenes formed the heart of domestic life, moments too small for history books, but large in their peace. As the centuries passed and artificial light filled the night, this rhythm of two sleeps began to fade. The long pause between them shortened, then disappeared. People stayed awake later, working, talking, or staring into brightness that never dimmed. The natural stillness of the night became rare, replaced by constant motion, yet something of that rhythm still lingers within us. Many people wake briefly in the middle of the night and wonder why. They turn over, sigh, and fall asleep again without knowing that this is an echo of a forgotten pattern, the body remembering how night once flowed, in two gentle waves of rest. If you've ever woken in the dark and felt calm rather than alarmed, you've touched that old rhythm. The stillness between sleeps can still feel like a gift, a quiet window where the world seems to wait for you, where time feels softer and the mind drifts without hurry. And so, as morning slowly returns, the second sleep arrives, lighter, more peaceful than the first. The candle's flame has long gone out, yet its warmth remains in memory. The night's secret has done its work, wrapping those who listen in its rhythm of calm. The world turns, dawn comes, and rest gives way to waking, just as it always has. Before clocks ticked and chimed their way through the hours, time itself was softer. It wasn't measured by numbers or machines, but by light, the rise and fall of the sun, the warmth of fire, and most quietly, the burn of a candle. In many homes, the candle did not simply give light. It told the passing of time. Some candles were made with careful precision, designed to burn at a steady pace. A mark along the side might show the end of an hour, or a small pin pressed into the wax would fall when the flame reached it, making a faint sound on the table below. This gentle rhythm of melting and silence was enough to guide a night's work or thought. In old workshops, a craftsman could tell how long he had worked simply by looking at how much of the candle remained. The flame's progress was his clock, steady but alive. Each inch of melted wax marked a moment of patience, of labor, of quiet effort unfolding beneath its glow. The candle clock carried no urgency. It didn't remind or warn, or scold. It simply continued, asking nothing. The passing of time was visible, not as numbers flashing in brightness, but as something soft, a slow descent of wax, a growing pool of light on wood. It turned time into something that could be felt, not counted. In monasteries and towns, people sometimes used candles to measure prayers or small tasks. A single prayer might last the life of a short candle. A long one could burn through a night of study. This made each flame more than practical. It became a symbol of endurance, a quiet companion to human focus and devotion. Merchants and travelers carried special candles marked to help them pace their journeys. One candle might measure an hour of writing, another the time needed to pack a wagon or walk a certain road. They learned to read time not by sound, but by sight, by watching how the light faded slowly toward its end. Even in large households, where servants and workers moved about, time was marked not by a clock's strike, but by a candle's sigh. Someone might say, "We'll speak when the candle burns halfway," or "Let this flame last until dawn." It was a gentler way of keeping order, more patient, more human. Children, too, grew up watching how wax melted. They learned that time was not something to chase, but something to observe. They could see the flame's small struggles, the way it flickered but persisted. The candle taught them that progress was not speed, but quiet consistency. In great halls or meeting rooms, where decisions were made, candles also guided the length of discussion. When the flame reached a mark, the meeting ended. No argument, no rush. The candle decided, and all accepted its silent authority. It was time itself made visible, shared, and fair. And in homes where nights were long and work was steady, the candle burned as a humble clock. It did not rush the hours away, nor demand attention. It simply glowed, faded, and ended like a small reflection of the passing world, reminding everyone that even time could move gently when lit by patience. When the wind blew through an open window and caused the flame to tremble, time seemed to waver with it. Those who watched the candle knew that even the smallest breath of air could stretch or shorten the hours. Time, in this way, was not absolute. It was alive, shifting gently with the world. In great estates and quiet cottages alike, people learned to live by this rhythm. They planned their nights not by minutes or seconds, but by candles and the moon. The hour was felt in the heart and seen in the glow, not measured by the ticking of gears. There was patience in this, and perhaps a kind of peace. Some old writings mention candles marked for specific moments, a visitor's arrival, a meal to be cooked, a story to be told. Each flame had purpose, yet none of it was hurried. The candle measured time without stealing attention. Its glow filled the room, but its passing went unnoticed, until only a small flame remained. The sight of wax melting lower and lower carried quiet wisdom. It reminded people that time could not be stored or reclaimed, but it could be witnessed and appreciated. Each drop of wax was a moment lived fully, never loud, never wasted, simply gone in silence. At night, those who stayed awake often felt the companionship of the candle as deeply as that of another person. It did not speak, yet its movement and warmth gave comfort. The flame leaned with the air, the wax softened, the shadows moved together. They marked the living breath of time. In some workshops, when the final candle went out, the day's labor ended. The workers would look at the small pool of wax, knowing that time itself had quietly chosen to rest. There was something deeply human in accepting that, allowing darkness to close the day, trusting that light would return again. Even when clocks became common, many people still kept candles nearby. They said the flame told time more honestly, with warmth, with imperfection, with life. A candle's passing was gentle, while the clock's ticking felt sharp, cold, and constant. One measured hours, the other measured experience. Historians later looked back and found something poetic in that practice. They saw in it an old truth, that before time became rigid, it was shared with nature, with breath, with flame. People didn't command it, they followed it, understanding that life's rhythm was never meant to be exact. If you imagine that world now, the candle's glow stretches across wooden walls, soft and uneven. A few voices murmur nearby. The air smells faintly of wax and smoke. No one worries about the hour. Time moves quietly, marked by light that melts instead of numbers that turn. And when the flame finally bends and fades, the hour ends without sound. The candle has completed its measure. The room, once golden, falls back into calm darkness. Time, for the moment, disappears, and in its place remains only peace, warmth, and the gentle promise of another light to come. Every candle's story ends the same way, with a quiet sigh of smoke and the promise of morning. In the final hour before dawn, the world holds its breath. The air grows cooler, the light gentler, and even the shadows seem to pause, as if waiting for the sun to return. The last flame of the night burns lower than all the rest. Its glow is no longer bright, but warm, like the fading memory of a dream. Those who stay awake through these hours often feel something they cannot quite name. Not sadness, not joy, but a calm awareness that night is giving way to day. In these moments, the candle becomes more than light. It becomes a companion in the slow passage between darkness and dawn. Its flame sways gently, mirroring the rhythm of tired eyes and slow breaths. The world is still, yet alive, held in a fragile balance between rest and renewal. For centuries, people cherished this hour. It was the time when the mind was clearest and the heart most honest. Farmers would rise quietly to begin their chores, travelers would pack their bags by dim light, and writers would finish their final line before sleep. The candle, patient as always, watched them all. As the wick shortened, the flame grew smaller but steadier, its core glowing deep orange. Each flicker seemed to stretch the night a little longer, reluctant to leave. In that soft resistance, people saw themselves trying to hold on to one last moment of stillness before the day began. The sounds of the world began to return slowly. A bird might stir in a tree, or the faint call of a rooster might echo through the mist. These were not interruptions, but gentle reminders that rest had done its work. The darkness had served its purpose, and light was ready to take its turn. When people spoke in this hour, their voices were softer, like those who had been awake too long but didn't want to disturb the peace. Words fell carefully into the quiet plans for the morning, small thanks for the night. The candle's light made faces glow with tenderness, reflecting both fatigue and contentment. Some believed that the last light before dawn carried a special beauty, not because it was brighter, but because it was temporary. It existed in a space between worlds, the night's farewell and the day's beginning. Those who saw it often remembered it, not as a sight, but as a feeling that lingered long after the sun rose. As the first threads of light crept through windows, the candle's glow began to fade. It didn't fight against the sun, it simply gave way, its small flame bowing to the greater brightness. There was grace in that surrender, a quiet acceptance that every light has its moment to shine, and its moment to rest. And when the flame finally fell into smoke, the room was left in silver-grey stillness. The wax cooled, the shadows disappeared, and the world exhaled. The night had ended, not with noise or alarm, but with a whisper, the soft ending of a candle's story and the quiet beginning of the day. Outside, the horizon began to bloom with pale color. The stars, one by one, withdrew into the fading night. What had been hidden only moments ago, the shape of trees, the outline of rooftops, slowly revealed itself under the first light of day. The world seemed to wake without sound, as though trying not to disturb the peace that had settled in the hours before. Inside, the room felt changed. The same walls, the same chair, the same cooled wax on the table, yet everything looked gentler. The soft grey of morning light was different from the candle's glow, but it carried the same calm, the same reminder that endings and beginnings were not so far apart. Some lingered for a moment, unwilling to move too quickly. They sat in that quiet space between night and day, letting the last trace of stillness fade naturally. It was a moment too brief to name, too delicate to hold a pause that belonged to no one and yet to everyone who had ever watched the dawn arrive. The scent of smoke drifted faintly in the air. It carried warmth, memory, and something unspoken, gratitude, perhaps, for the long hours that had passed in peace, for those who had worked, written, thought, or simply rested by the candle's light. This was a small goodbye to the comfort of darkness, and as the sun finally lifted above the horizon, it filled the room with gold where the candle's light had once lived. The new day had come, steady and bright, but the memory of the night remained. The candle's story might have ended, yet its quiet lessons, patience, focus, stillness lingered in every beam of light that followed. For the people of old, this moment marked renewal. The chores began, the roads filled, the air buzzed again with movement. Yet somewhere, deep within, they carried the calm of the night with them, a reminder that peace was never lost, only waiting for evening to return. The world, once dark, was alive again. The cycle continued, flame to smoke, night to dawn, stillness to sound. And though the candle's work was done, its memory glowed invisibly, like a soft echo in the heart. In that way, it never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, becoming part of the light it once helped to guide. For you, too, this is a kind of gentle return. The story fades, the world grows brighter, and your thoughts, softened by calm, drift like morning mist. The night has spoken softly through history, and you have listened. That quiet connection between you and time itself, that's what stays. If you're still awake, take one last deep breath. Feel how the stillness of history remains with you, not heavy, but comforting. Let your eyes close whenever they wish. The flame may be gone, but its calm stays near, wrapping you in warmth as the world turns once more toward light. And now, before we part ways, thank you truly for spending this quiet night together. If you've enjoyed this gentle journey through history, I invite you to subscribe and return next time. There's always another forgotten story waiting for you. Next time, we'll wander into a darker mystery, exploring what people once believed lurked in the woods at night. Until then, rest well, and may peace find you wherever you are.